Today is inspiration part 2, and I'm going to talk about some things I've never talked about today. I've never written about it. It's not in my book. It's not in any of my videos. So this is cool, new stuff that you guys are going to really like. Okay, just to recap, before we get started, does anyone have a question or comment about anything? I mean, I'll give you guys a minute as we talk about, because this is a lot to learn, but you guys are gonna get it. You're gonna love it. Okay. So last week, and we have been talking about getting into higher thinking. Kathleen's example was so poignant about getting into higher thinking and how her emotions got better and she saw more truth. I mean, that was just a beautiful example of getting into higher thinking. And when we're in this higher thinking, the answers are there. So in the bottom, there's the problem. Gail's in a lot of problems with her mom right now. Problems are not bad because they always create more desire. And Gail, you're at this place where you're just really knowing there's bigger things for you, and it's just kind of collecting data. I like that. I don't like that. So problems stay here. The more we think about problems, the more we attract problems. Like law of attraction, like attracts like. We think about problems, we get more of them. In our experiences with our relationships and everything else, Kathleen, again, another great example, the more she thought about the problems, the more she's kind of trapped in the problems. But when you get more in inspiration, the desires that those problems have created in us, and problems always equal new desires. Problems are not there to make us suffer. They're to grow us and give us new ideas about things. So we get into higher thinking to find where we're supposed to be now, this new life that we've created. Okay? So I wanted to talk today, and if you've read my book, or I've mentioned this in the class too, that when I came up with kind of the condensation of what thought technology is and the formula, I mentioned that there were lots of spiritual practices and therapies and things like that really backed up what I was talking about. And they have very similar things and nuances. When Gail talked about, reconnecting with Jewish teachings, I'm like, share with me what you get, because we're learning from so many things. And we've talked about some very useful things already. And just to recap a couple other things is cognitive behavioral therapy is that piece where we're going to go over it more later, but cognitive behavioral therapy basically tells you a thought creates an emotion, which creates a behavior, right? So it's the same thing I'm talking about. And in Buddhism, which DBT has a lot of Buddhist tenets in it, we learn about dialectics, we learn about detachment, which Gail mentioned today. We learned about mindfulness, we learn about meditation. Those are pieces of thought technology in Buddhism. Today we're going to talk about 2 more that you're really going to like. I hope this blows your mind. So we're going to talk about rational emotive behavioral therapy. I'm going to explain it to you, and positive psychology. And I'm going to teach you some things from both of those therapies so you can apply them to your life and your thinking, right, for greater outcome. Better our thinking, the better outcome. I've already taught you a lot of this through my coaching with you and through my book and through the class. And you'll recognize some of this that I've taught you. I'm going to teach you really the theory and stuff behind it. Okay. Positive psychology, number 1. Does anyone really know what positive psychology is or has studied it any? I mean, you hear about it, but okay, this will all be new for you, and I think you're going to like it. Okay, here's the background on positive psychology and what it means to you. So there was a doctor, his name was Martin Seligman. I don't really know how to pronounce that. It's spelled Seligman. And if anyone knows how to pronounce that, let me know. But anyway, Dr. Seligman grew really frustrated in the 60s and 70s, well, and a little bit later too, with psychology's really narrow focus on the negative. So if you've ever been to therapy and they're like so focused on the negative, so much about mental illness, abnormal psychology, this is where the thought in psychology and the schools of thought and the research had been. Mental illness, abnormal psychology, trauma, suffering, pain. And so what he wanted to do, and he became president of the American Psychiatric Association, when he took that office, he said, we've been focused here. Let's go into the dialectic, right? And let's focus on positive psychology. And he wanted to focus research and thinking and techniques with therapists on happiness, well-being, about being exceptional, flourishing, about our strengths, not our weaknesses. And so whenever I have clients come to me and they have a therapist that just goes back into childhood trauma and mental illness and things like that, I feel frustrated for my clients because I feel like, yes, that's good to talk about. Yes, it's good to understand. Yes, it's good to feel validated. But I feel like it's missing the whole new way of thinking in psychology and in therapy. It's the positive psychology. Okay, and the interesting thing about it is psychology, when he took over American Psychiatric Association, that was in 1998. So that wasn't that long ago, where he wanted to change the direction of the field. So I would imagine that many schools, many schools that teach therapists have not really caught up with this yet. And I'm going to give you some resources in your homework and in the portal. I have a great article that is just a great summary of positive psychology. Also, Harvard has a school of positive psychology and coaching, and lots of coaches come from the school of thought of positive psychology. A lot of the tools of coaching that I use are from positive psychology, and you're like, duh, this is what she talks about when she talks to me, right? Okay, so in general, I just want you to know the greatest, it's really, you can read the whole long article if you want, but I'll boil it down for you. The greatest benefit of positive psychology is that it teaches us the power of shifting your mental perspective. And we're going to drill down into how you can use that a little bit. But before that, I want to tell you something I discovered today that I think is so interesting, especially for this group. Okay. I can't wait to share this with you guys. So a key finding in his research on positive psychology is that you need both happiness and meaning in life to have a good life. You need both. You need happiness and meaning in life. So that's why I started with meaning at the beginning of this, right? We're going to drill down, and you're going to be really surprised by some of this. Okay. Here is the most interesting thing. I'm just going to throw this out there, and then I'm going to describe it, because this is the part that blew my mind. He said, takers experience more happiness and givers experience more meaning. Interesting. We're going to talk about that because you guys are givers. Every one of us are. So we might experience more meaning, but not as much happiness. Just something to think about. Okay. So what is happiness? How do you get happy? Happy is present oriented. Okay. We practice it in mindfulness. So you just think about this. practically speaking, when we're feeling negative emotion and we stop and we're present to the moment, we stop and smell the roses, we're grateful for something, we take a mindful moment to watch our child or to listen to music. That's what happiness feels like. Okay. If you want more happiness, if you remember this, okay, takers, check this out. Takers are happier. Takers are happier than givers. Okay? If you want more happiness, accept others' generosity. Any thoughts on that before I continue? Or is that just like too, like, does it make sense, or is it like, I don't understand that?
Makes total sense to me, because one of the things, that I have difficulty in my life, taking and receiving. I'm good at giving, I love to give, but there's something about me that I've been working on to be able to accept. So what you're describing makes perfect sense to me.
It's cool, huh? All right. Okay, if you want more happiness in your life, accept others' generosity. So, if someone is loving you, accept it. Thank you for loving me. Don't let your mind, think you're unworthy or the past or anything. Just say thank you. Accept it. Okay, something else is spending money on experiences boosts happiness. Spending money on experiences boosts happiness more than spending money on material possessions. Experiences versus material possessions. And gratitude is a big contributor to happiness in life. That's the present. It's just thank you for these things. Okay. So this is a big one for me because I'm always, and we're going to go into this more. You guys are going to love this. So it's just like, okay, I want to do all these things. I want to accomplish all these things. Wait a second. Remember, just be grateful for what I've already accomplished or what's already happened. That's a big struggle for me. I can be grateful for, say, my child or, the air conditioner or things, but I have a really hard time being grateful for what I've accomplished. Just to say, yeah, look, I've done that, instead of being wound up about everything I need to do. Okay. Studies show that happiness is contagious, right? So those with happy friends and happy significant others are more likely to be happy in the future. So choose happy people to be around. It's contagious. And there's some research on happiness in the job. It makes sense, but remember this, and I want you to think about what you're going to do when I talk to you about boosting happiness in the workplace. You're automatically going to think about how negative some people are and how it affects you. And you're going to be like, yeah, I'm not happy because they're negative, right? And that makes sense. But also, I want you to think, okay, even if they're negative, I can do these things in the workplace to make my experience better. And then it will be contagious. So, number one, positive emotions boost our job performance, our own job performance. Okay. If we have positive emotions, it boosts our performance. And just like I said, positive emotions in the workplace are contagious, which means one positive person or team can have a ripple effect that can extend throughout the entire organization. I saw that working so much. Okay, in a corporation. Small, simple actions can have a big impact on our happiness, meaning that it doesn't take much to encourage your workplace to become a happier, more positive place. Do something nice. Tell a joke. Bring muffins. Just do something small for other people. Okay. Any questions or comments about happiness before we go on to meaning? Okay. Yep. Someone.
Well, do you like? Is this written in your? It's not in your book, so anything we can do to expand that information?
Yeah, you know what I'm going to do? I'll post these notes in the portal. It's just going to be my rough notes. It's not going to be pretty, but I'll give you all my notes. Okay. And the links I'm going to give you are going to go into so much detail on this, okay? Okay. Meaning in life, the other component of having a good life. Okay, meaningfulness is more focused on the past and the future and how they link to the present. So remember I said I'm always looking for, how can what I do today affect my future? Or how can I make sense of what happened in the past? Those things. You guys are all talking about a lot of meaning. And like I said, givers experience more meaning. So you guys don't need to know this, but it's interesting. And especially as you think about other people in your life who don't have as much meaning, but they may have happiness. Some people have neither. But to increase meaning in our lives, you want to give back to others. We know that. Another way to increase meaning in your life is express your authentic self. Express your authentic self. So try working on your practice of authenticity. A sense of strong personal identity. A sense of strong personal identity is linked to meaning, but not to happiness. So I'm giving you guys, hopefully you're seeing, I'm giving you the tools to have the authentic self, strong identity, which is going to increase your meaning even more and help you know what you want out of life and why you're on this earth. And then we're doing lots of tools to get you happier too. Okay, this is really cool. And you're probably going to want to read over this, but those who are high in meaning but low in happiness tend to feel, they're more likely to feel worry, stress, and anxiety, right? It makes sense. If you're not feeling happy, you're going to feel more worry, stress, and anxiety. But those that are high in meaning inherently also can feel more worry, stress, and anxiety. It's because we often, as givers, are thinking about other people. We're thinking about providing for them. We're thinking about things we can do for them, how to create something with all the components. So I don't want you to reduce your meaning. I want you to increase your happiness on those things. All right. One last thing about, so here's the segue from positive psychology into rational emotive behavioral therapy. And there's so much more to positive psychology. These were just some of the aha things I wanted to share with you guys today. Dr. Seligman, however you say it, in the 60s and 70s, before he promoted positive psychology, he laid the foundation for the well-known psychological theory called learned helplessness. Okay? I've got a link to it, but it explained how humans and animals can learn to become helpless and feel that they don't have control over what happens to them. That was me in depression, right? And basically the theory said, well, he proved it, is that, if you tell a child they can't solve it, if there's abuse or other situations, he did the experiment with dogs actually, then your beliefs believe you can't solve things, or your beliefs believe you can only solve things a certain way. It's a learned helplessness. I can't affect my life, and it's very, very tied to depression. I feel helpless. And if you put this in the thinking of thought technology, it's this going around and around, feeling helpless, feeling like I can't solve the problem. The cure for this is learned optimism. And Craig and I have talked about some components of it a lot. It's grit is one. It's just learning to stay in there with it and to explore other options. If a door closes, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to keep going until I figure this out. And the other thing is knowing I have choices. I have internal choices in my thoughts, and I have external choices. I do have choices. I do feel in control. And this piece right here was the piece that made me feel not dependent on others and independent. So I can feel independent. I feel like now I can take care of myself. I don't feel like I have to depend on others. Now, I've talked a little bit about rational emotive behavioral therapy because in Albert Ellis and Martin Seligman, however you say, actually worked on this together. So why we don't hear about rational emotive behavioral therapy? It's really not used because cognitive behavioral therapy kind of grew from it. But when I started my recovery, I had a book from Albert Ellis. And it was one of the tools I had. Like in my story, I said I had all these papers and everything, and I read it, and this is where I learned how to change my thoughts. His little book, the book, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything. And basically, he does I'll give you resources on this, but I'm going to just go over it quickly as another tool. So they came up with something called the ABCs. So see if this sounds familiar to you guys. The tool they set to make yourself learn optimism. This is how they teach how to be optimistic. They're the ABCs. Number 1, A equals adversity. So just like I, have like a way to do it, they have you do it too. So the A is describe the event that happened. So you had an adverse situation, can be anything from your childhood or to anything. So most therapists start with that adversity and they stay there. So then we learn to feel helpless because we're like in the adversity for the rest of our lives. But what they try to teach you is you don't evaluate it or judge it, just describe the event. Just like I teach you describing without emotion. So the example I have here is a team member missed an important deadline and put us behind schedule for the rest of the checkpoints. See, if I describe that adverse event like that, I'm not saying anything about how it made me feel. I'm not judging anyone. I just describe it. So we do a lot of the work in your DBT manual on just describing it. It's the same thing. Okay, and there B is belief. Now explain how you interpreted or what your belief was about that adversity. So if you guys have an adverse situation, it can be something small that happened this morning or something that happened 20 years ago. You're going to describe it, and then and especially if we have unresolved, conflict about things. Kathleen gave the beautiful example about how she looked at her beliefs about something, and she said, I'm interpreting it this way. Okay, not just what your default belief system is. You're going to analyze it and say, this is my default belief system. Okay, so for an example, you're going to start to examine your thoughts. I know Courtney's doing this a lot too, and say, I can't believe they are so selfish and unwilling to take this business seriously. Okay, that would be our default thought. So we're just becoming aware of our thoughts and saying, yeah, that is my default. And then C is the consequence. And then, so what you're going to do then is you're going to say, when I default to that belief, it makes me feel that way. The consequence of that thought about that situation makes me feel a certain way. We're going to go more into this next week, but I'm giving you a high level, piquing your curiosity, okay? So then you're going to say, you know what? When I think that thought, I feel really frustrated and afraid or discouraged or I hate my job, okay? And then the D in the ABCs, which goes into D's, is, do you have any way to dispute your belief? Dispute your belief. We're going to go more into this, but this is where I say challenge your thought. So I believe that when my mother doesn't answer my phone call, that she doesn't love me. Do I have any way? And when I feel that way, or when I think that way, it makes me feel unloved and miserable. Do I have any way to dispute that and think maybe she just doesn't have time, or, maybe she doesn't feel well? So that's just challenging our beliefs, right? So this is another thought technology. It's the ABCs from these guys, and see how it gets you into higher thinking. When I think my mother doesn't love me, I'm in lower thinking and I can't see a solution and I feel awful. When I think maybe she doesn't feel well, and then I think, then I feel compassion for her. Maybe I just go help her, and then I feel loved and I feel loving. That's how we're really learning to challenge our thoughts.
Tami, I was wondering if you could tell me what the C stands for. I didn't get that.
Yep, and I'll send you these notes too. It is consequence. Think about the feelings and actions that result from these beliefs. So what's the consequence to you of believing these things? What's the consequence to your relationships for that automatic belief that you have? Okay. All right. And then the last bit on this is E, and that's called energization. I don't even know. That's like really complicated, but it's E. And this is the last step. So you want to say with the E, I'll just say energizing the situation, is when you reframe this a different way, what was the new result? What was the better result? Because you reframed it, because you looked at it differently. So at the first piece with the C, you're looking at the consequences of having that belief. D, you're like challenging, disputing it. E, you're like, whoa, that went so much better. So you're really using your brains here. You're really, really, really using your brains. And we're going to go more into this next week. You're using your brains to think differently. This will change your thoughts, will change your beliefs. What's a belief? A thought we keep thinking over and over again. It's automatic. But when you do this, guys, you know what's going to happen? You've already started to see it. When you do this, you're actually cutting new grooves into your brain. The MRI of your brain, when you do this, is going to be different. It's going to light up differently because you're changing your thoughts when you do this. And now, from all the work I do, and I still have to do work because, I hate to tell you this, but it's not a learn this once and then it's done forever. You got to just keep doing this, right? Which is why I, teach a class, because it makes me, redo it all the time. But what happens is in Goleman's research on meditation shows that you do default to different thoughts. You do default to different thoughts. I automatically think differently. I completely think differently than I used to, which when I think differently, I have different emotions, I have better feeling emotions, and I have different actions. And when I have different thoughts, emotions, and actions, it makes my whole relationships better, makes my job better, it makes me more effective. That's how it works. And you could see the snowball effect on this. So I think I have better thoughts. I have better feeling emotions. My actions are better. And so this is how it just keeps getting better and better. Our lives just keep getting better and better and better. Because then my actions are all moving me towards where I want to go in life and I feel good about. So that's a little new thing for you guys. Any thoughts on that?